In the glittering markets of Zarnok Prime, beneath glass domes that shimmered with ultraviolet light, aliens from across the spiral arm gathered to buy the galaxy's rarest commodities. Exotic creatures, forbidden minerals, designer genetics, now the newest trend humans. They weren't bought as slaves, not as workers, not even as threats. They were bought as pets. Small, fragile, weirdly expressive. The humans arrived in crates stamped with Earth's faded flag labeled Homo sapiens, class mammalian companion. Lorenz, domestic use only. No one knew who first collected them. No one cared. They sold like wildfire. Zarnak nobles tucked baby humans in jeweled baskets. Wealthy merchants showed off their smart humans doing tricks. Others dressed them in ribbons or armor for novelty fights. Some bought them for their strange smells, their mimicry, their odd talent for surviving things that should kill them. No one feared them. That was the first mistake. The humans were taken young, often infants, toddlers, or small children. The alien buyers liked their size, their emotions, the way they bonded. It made training easier, taming easier. Or so they thought. In the city of Tavasri, home of the grandest pet showroom in Sector 9, a year-old human named Milo sat quietly in a plush enclosure. Glass walls, soft music, plenty of food. A curved alien watched him with curious eyes, 4 sets of lids blinking slowly. He is well-tempered, the vendor said. Very clean. Responds to several commands. Fetch, sit. Smile. See, Milo smiled. The alien chuckled in its throat. Adorable. What does it eat? Nearly anything. Quite adaptive. That was the second mistake. Far across the sector, in a storage facility where unsold humans were kept in stasis, something stirred. A young girl named Lacey had figured out how to fake hibernation. She taught the others. In darkness, behind crates and biofoam, they whispered, learned, shared. They listened to the aliens, copied their language, studied their routines, and then they waited not for escape, but for something better. Because humans weren't just cute. They weren't just adaptable. They weren't just curious. They were apex predators. And for the first time in galactic history, someone had made the mistake of putting them in cages. The alien zoo ship drifted through the stars' cold steel wrapped in velvet luxury. Its halls were filled with songs, colors, and sweet perfumes meant to calm the creatures inside. They weren't prisoners. Not officially. They were guests, its companions, exotic beings from primitive worlds. But the humans knew better. Inside Habitat Room 9B, a 6-year-old girl named Kara sat cross-legged beside a cracked feeding bowl. Her eyes were calm. Too calm. Around her, other children played or cried or slept. The walls blinked with glowing shapes meant to entertain, but Kara ignored them. She was watching the door. Not because she wanted to escape. She was waiting for the next alien. Not to run from it, but to study it. The aliens who ran the pet stores were a race called the Zentari soft-bodied, color-shifting creatures with long arms and a love for luxury. To them, humans were adorable. Soft skin, round faces, big eyes, like baby animals, only smarter. It's the perfect pet for the galactic elite. They didn't understand Earth. They didn't understand what humans were. The first mistake had been capturing toddlers and babies. The second was raising them with toys instead of chains. Because humans don't forget, and humans learn. In another habitat, a boy named Rami had already pulled apart 3 of his feeding machines. Zentari thought he was curious. They didn't realize he was reverse engineering the tech with crayon drawings and broken spoons. Kara and Rami hadn't met yet, but they would. And when they did, the real revolution would begin. Meanwhile, aboard the Zentari pleasure barge Velvet Whisper, nobles from a dozen star empires came to admire the rarest pets in the galaxy. In one display dome, a human boy was dancing in a fountain. In another, a group of toddlers were pretending to be puppies just to make the aliens laugh. The Zentari called it adorable. They didn't see the cold glances the humans gave each other when the aliens looked away. They didn't notice the way the children passed messages in their games, using song lyrics and hand signs. The humans were playing along. For now. Back in 9B, Kara pressed her ear against the vent shaft. She had counted the guards. 3 on rotation. Always passed by every 28 minutes. She didn't know the alien word for minutes, but she had invented a way to track them. By blinking to the rhythm of the flickering light above the feeding unit, she wasn't old enough to spell her name, but she could build a working escape plan from scraps and instincts. Because Kara was human, humans weren't made for cages. When the alarm finally sounded in Sector Epsilon, the Zintari assumed a system error. It wasn't. Rami had fed a hacked command through the ship's food dispensers. Nothing dangerous, just a looping glitch that turned on every auto-cleaner at once. The ship's AI didn't panic. The alien caretakers did. And while they scrambled to shut down the malfunction, Kara crawled through the vent shaft and dropped into the maintenance corridor, right on time. They hadn't even locked the cages. They didn't think pets could plan. They were wrong. In a hidden chamber behind the water recycling bay, Kara met Rami. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. He handed her a shard of metal from a broken toy drone. She handed him a set of map sketches drawn in food paste. That was the moment the galaxy changed. To human children, no weapons, no freedom, no help. But a fire in their hearts no alien could understand. Kara tightened her grip on the sharpened spoon. It wasn't a weapon yet, but in her hands, it was a symbol. A tool. A beginning. Rami stood beside her in the dim chamber behind the water recycling bay. Pipes hissed. Lights buzzed. Somewhere in the distance, Zintari caretakers still scrambled to fix the harmless glitch Rami had unleashed. They had a window, not long. Kara looked at him. Just a boy, maybe 7 years old, with big eyes and smudged cheeks. But his gaze was clear, focused. He handed her a small strip of reflective plastic, a signal. If they could reach the upper atrium, they could catch the light from the Starlight Dome and flash it across to Habitat 1 for C, where older kids were held. Stronger ones. Bigger. Kara nodded. They weren't escaping alone. They were waking the others. The climb through the service ducts was tight and silent. Kara went first, spoon clenched between her teeth. Ami followed, dragging a torn scrap of blanket as a sled for their scavenged items. Drone gears, broken feeder parts, a cracked hologram disc. They weren't trained. They were just children. But they were human children. That made all the difference. In the upper atrium, Zintari nobles gathered for the daily pet showcase. A dozen human kids had been dressed in cute uniforms and lined up like prize puppies. Music played. Lights glowed. The aliens cooed and exchanged credit slips. Behind the glass, Kara's eyes appeared. She blinked 3 times. Then again a flash. A pause. Another flash. 3 short, 2 long, 1 short. Morse code. It meant, now. One of the older kids, Maya, 9 years old, quiet and fierce, twitched, her head slightly, then stomped her foot. The line of human children collapsed in choreographed chaos, fake crying, pushing, rolling, screaming. I laughed, thinking it was some new trick. They didn't see Maya palm the security badge off the handler's belt. They didn't hear the click of the maintenance door behind the viewing dome, being unlocked by a hacked override spoon wedged into the panel. They didn't realize the pet show was over, and the human uprising had begun. By the time Kara and Rami reached Habitat 1-2F, the kids inside were already stirring. One of them, Tommy, barely 5, had used food paste to block the room's security lens. Another, Leah, had tied bedsheets into rope. These kids hadn't spoken to Kara or Rami in weeks, but they knew. Somehow all of them knew. That the humans were thinking alike now, moving like a tribe. Acting like something the galaxy hadn't seen in a long, long time. A coordinated pack of predators the Zintari were starting to notice. Too late. An alarm went off in Subdeck C, another in the medbay. Doors were glitching open. Holograms were stuttering. One by one, habitats were being emptied. Not by force, by planning, by instinct. By spoons and stolen badges and careful footsteps. The humans weren't running away. They were taking the ship. In the bridge, High Caretaker Nell Ricks watched the screens with growing panic. The pets had deactivated 7 enclosures. 16 of the 43 human juveniles were missing. And now, the ship's engines were powering down. How? Nell Ricks hissed. They're infants. But the infants were watching him now through hacked security cams. Deep below, in an old storage room filled with dusty cages and broken toys, Kara stood in front of a glowing panel. "Rami," she said, holding up the badge. "Let's see what else they never locked." Rami grinned. The revolution wasn't loud, wasn't bloody, not yet. It was slow, clever, human, and it had just begun. The ship's heartbeat had changed. No longer the soft hum of drifting leisure. The Zentari Pet-class cruiser now pulsed with something uneven, like it was holding its breath. The adults couldn't feel it, but the children could. Kara crouched beside the open vent shaft above the command corridor, listening. Zentari guards passed below, arguing, panicking. There in the systems, seal off Deck 7, who gave them access to the utility grid. Rami slid up beside her, whispering, "They're scared." Kara didn't respond. She didn't need to. They should be. In Habitat 8A, once a nursery with pastel walls and humming lullaby drones, the older children were holding a vote. Hands rose. All of them. No one argued. No one hesitated. They'd tasted freedom, seen the cracks in their alien prison. No one wanted to go back to being a cute companion. No one wanted to sit in a cage while aliens cooed at them like they were clever pets learning tricks. They had tricked the galaxy. Dim eyes, small hands, and giggles. But they were done pretending. In the engineering section, a Zentari drone technician named Revolt found himself staring into the eyes of a 6-year-old girl. She was standing on a crate, wearing a pink sleeping gown, holding a sharpened spoon. Revolt blinked. You're not supposed to be here." The girl smiled. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Behind her, 4 more children stepped into the light teach, holding pieces of pipe, stripped wiring, and one with a shock prod taken from an unconscious handler. They weren't aggressive, weren't angry, but they were focused. That was worse. Out. Backed away slowly. And ran. Back on the bridge, High Caretaker Norex began to sweat through his fur. Dozens of alerts now blinked in angry red. One of the escape pods had been launched. The Zentari assistant stammered, but there was no life form detected on board. That was the point. The kids had learned how to create false readings. They were testing them, distracting them. These weren't random tantrums anymore. They were strategies. Humans were organizing. Down in storage block Delta, Kara and Maya sat around an improvised table made from overturned feeding trays. The map of the ship had been drawn in crayon. Crossed out zones, patrolled corridors, weak doors, vent routes, drone charging stations, all noted in messy handwriting and snack paste. Every child arriving from a freed habitat added something new. Every escape improved. They were evolving not with time, but with pressure. Underestimated, overwatched. Until now, we're not the pets, Maya said flatly. They are, Kara nodded. They weren't just escaping, they were building something. Humanity in its smallest form. And in the galaxy's eyes, its most terrifying. On the Zentari news networks, reports began to spread. Earth species juveniles staged ship-wide disruption. Galactic Council to investigate pet program standards. Is the human brain too dangerous for domestication? The headlines meant nothing to the kids. They didn't want revenge. They wanted freedom, and it was working. One spoon, one step, one scared Zentari at a time. The Zentari didn't know how to handle defiance without programming. They had rules for disobedient pets. It sprays, collars, mild shock therapy. But none of those worked on the children anymore, because the children had read the manuals, reprogrammed the collars, and trained each other. In the ship's diplomatic lounge, usually reserved for visiting dignitaries, Kara stood barefoot on the central table. She was covered in grime and crayon streaks, with a mop handle strapped to her back like a sword. Across from her sat Envoy Director Trellick, his long ears pinned back in discomfort. 2 twitchy assistants flanked him, clutching datapads and whispering nervously. "We would like to speak with your leader," Trellick said cautiously. Kara tilted her head. "I'm the leader." The assistants winced. Trellick recovered. "Very well. We wish to negotiate." Kara crossed her arms. "Then sit down." The children had seized 10 compartments. They weren't trying to take the ship, they were dividing it, creating borders. "We want the top decks," Kara said simply. "Food access, the media room, and the learning pods." Trellick frowned. Those are for higher species," Kara said, and reached for a console. The lights in 3 decks went out instantly. Silence. "We learned how to speak ship," Kara said calmly. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Back in Habitat 6B, the younger kids had a new game. Diplomacy. One child would act as the alien, flailing their arms and speaking in gibberish. Another would be the kid commander, holding a plushie and making demands. The winner was whoever got more snacks in the trade. They didn't know it yet, but they were learning the art of power, and in time, they'd master it. Centauri broadcasts now aired emergency training. Warning: if your human exhibits creative tool use, isolate immediately. Do not allow groups of humans to play unsupervised. Avoid eye contact if the human is silently organizing others. But it was too late. The galaxy had learned a terrible truth. Humans were not cute. They were contagious. Ideas spread through them like fire. And once one child learned to open a lock, soon they all did. Trellick returned to the Council fleet. He brought no humans. It's only a treaty, scrawled in marker, with jelly stains. It read, "Let us grow, or we will outgrow you." Now the galaxy's rulers had laughed at first. A toddler uprising? How quaint, how absurd. Until they received footage of a Zarkothi warcruiser covered in crayon murals, and a 3-year-old sitting in the command chair, sipping juice from a sippy cup with full bridge control. No one laughed after that. It began with playrooms turning into planning hubs. Cushions became barricades. Blankets became tactical maps. Stuffed toys marked control zones. They weren't pretending to play war anymore. They were practicing. Aliens didn't understand human childhood. They thought innocence meant weakness. But human childhood was a boot camp. We learned everything through games. Once the humans figured that out, they started playing for real. Fleet Station Viral 9 made the mistake of housing a petting zoo of human toddlers for entertainment. They didn't understand the danger of placing 30 bored children in one habitat with construction tools left lying around. Within 7 days, the toddlers dismantled a gravity unit, built a seesaw with stolen parts, reverse-engineered the station's food replicator to produce unlimited marshmallows, declared independence. They renamed the station Camp Humania. A hand-drawn flag was raised over the airlock. It featured a smiling stick figure holding a wrench and riding a screaming alien. Centauri Command scrambled to deploy pacifiers. Literal ones. But the humans refused them. "We've upgraded," said Kara, now wearing a stitched cape and issuing orders to 5 other squad leaders with walkie-talkies made from hijacked communicator parts. She didn't need orders. She gave them. The revolution spread in viral waves. Other species, once proud conquerors, found themselves outmaneuvered in their own homes. Pet humans. Opened locked cabinets, disabled surveillance nodes, trained local wildlife as allies, insects, rodents, one clever octopoid. Some formed alliances with rogues that found them amusing. One child, aged 6, was declared honorary sub-commander by a malfunctioning drone army, after she taught them how to draw smiley faces on targets. But this wasn't just chaos. It was organized mischief. There were no mass casualties, no deliberate harm. It's only a message loud and clear. You don't own us. And more disturbingly, we're still just playing. Kara stood before the growing crowd in Camp Humania's commons. Behind her, a crude map of known Centauri territory had been painted on the wall in jam and chalk. Lines marked potential toy raids. A small hand tugged her sleeve. "Are we still pets?" a younger boy asked. Kara shook her head. No. She looked up at the ceiling where stars blinked on the holoscreen. Now they are. Across the stars, alarms blared. Entire colonies were on high alert, but not for an invading fleet. No. They were bracing for preschoolers armed with repurposed kitchen gadgets. The so-called Great Toy Rebellion had begun. No alien was ready. It started with stolen access cards and hacked nanny bots. At first, the bots were designed to monitor the humans, feed them, bathe them, keep them occupied. But the children had learned how to reprogram them, using stickers. 1 sticker on the forehead, dance mode. 2 stickers, stealth mode. 3 stickers, build me a fort or FaceTime out mode. Soon, every station's childcare unit had flipped. Babysitters became bodyguards. The Centauri High Council issued a crisis decree. Retrieve all human juveniles. Neutralize the uprising using non-lethal containment. Avoid triggering tantrum-class emotional events. They didn't understand. It was already too late. Because the humans weren't scared anymore, they were having fun. On Station Glax 14, A toddler named Milo took over a hydroponics wing using a single spoon and a captured cleaning drone. He called it New Earth, his demands, juice boxes and cartoons on loop. When denied, he unleashed an army of frogs he'd secretly bred in nutrient vats. The frogs wore tiny backpacks filled with jelly beans as bribes. No one knows how he trained them. Scientists refused to return. On Sivirth's moon nest, a group of human children turned a science exhibit into a trap maze. Alien researchers who tried to retrieve them were lured in with toy squeaks and never made it past the second hallway. The humans didn't hurt anyone. They just locked them in until they agreed to sit through a puppet show explaining why humans should be in charge. All across alien territory, the chaos spread, but unlike war, this wasn't destruction. It was creative conquest. Children rewired broadcast systems to play bedtime songs at full volume. They infiltrated city power grids and made every light flash to the rhythm of Baby Shark. They didn't want to destroy civilization. They wanted to redecorate it. At the center of it all, in the bridge of a commandeered training frigate renamed the Playpen, Kara watched reports come in. Each message more absurd than the last. Her second-in-command, Leo, age 5, saluted her with a peanut butter-covered hand. "Mission Jellybean complete," he said proudly. She nodded. "Good, prep the glitter cannons," he gasped. "Are we going full sparkle?" She smirked. "We're sending a message." And the message was clear. You don't get to own a species that invents imaginary friends and then teaches them military tactics. You don't get to cage a mind that turns cardboard boxes into starships. And you definitely don't get to sell humans as pets and expect them to stay quiet. The revolution wasn't bloody. It was sticky, giggly, unpredictable, and completely unstoppable. Because the aliens didn't capture humans. They adopted chaos incarnate. Across the galaxy, emergency treaties were being drafted not with generals, but with toddlers. Alien leaders who once ruled interstellar empires now found themselves kneeling on foam mats, holding juice boxes, negotiating with children who didn't understand the concept of mercy, but did understand when it was time for snacks. On the diplomatic vessel Star Whisper, the Zentari ambassador personally attempted peace talks with a group of 5-year-olds. They were seated in a blanket fort. It was structurally sound, possibly better than most Centauri housing units. Inside, the ambassador was handed terms written in glitter pen on sticky notes. More cartoons, less bedtime, no broccoli ever again, plushy reparations, universal naptime enforcement. The ambassador who once negotiated peace during a galactic arms race hesitated. Then Kara entered the room. She was now known only as Commander Crayon. Her coat was made of patched-up alien uniforms. Her belt held markers, a walkie-talkie, and a whistle shaped like a duck. She saluted. "We're willing to talk, but first," she motioned to a small chair opposite the blanket throne. "You have to sit in the thinking chair." The alien shuddered, but obeyed. In orbit, chaos had become organized. The humans had commandeered daycare centers, nanny bots, school transports, and even zoo habitats, turning them into bases of power. Each was run by a child with a title. Captain Cookie, age 6, ran the snack distribution fleet. General Wiggles, age 4, controlled the squishy floor division. Queen Blanket, age 5, had declared her entire room a sovereign kingdom, where no adult was allowed without permission and a sticker pass. The aliens tried resisting. They deployed sleep gas. The humans took longer naps. They tried jamming signals. The kids just switched to hand signs and crayon-coded messages. They tried reasoning. And that was their greatest mistake. Because human children are natural negotiators, and when they learn they have leverage, they use it. At the central broadcast tower of Glax Prime, Kara's voice crackled over every speaker. "We don't want war. We want cookies. We want cartoons. Most of all, we want respect. We are not pets. We are people. It's tiny, loud, sticky people. We will return your colonies when you recognize us as equals, and we want hugs." Silence followed. And then it began. Aliens across systems stood and clapped. Some wiped tears. Some just collapsed in defeat. The Galactic Pet Registry was disbanded overnight. All remaining humans were removed from care centers and sent to learn, grow, and lead. In a final peace ceremony, Zentari Prime invited Kara to speak. She stood on the stage, holding her stuffed bear, Captain Cuddles. She looked over the sea of aliens. "Today we are free," she said, "but also it's nap time now, so we'll finish the speech after juice." The crowd rose in applause. Thus ended the great human pet rebellion, not with a bang, but with stickers, glitter, and the unstoppable power of imagination. The courthouse on Velcrin 5 had never seen such chaos. Dozens of alien officials were arguing over the same case. Holographic records flickered in the air above the central dome, showing footage from across the galaxy, humans refusing cages, organizing in secret, and now submitting adoption papers. Yes, adoption papers. Little Mia, the same toddler who once rode a shrieking Threxen, like a pony, stood calmly beside her designated owner, the rich but clueless collector Grorks. He had filed a complaint after she dismantled half his mansion with nothing but spoons, string, and a suspiciously intelligent hamster. But Mia, in her soft human voice, had declared in open court, "He feeds me, bathes me, and even reads me bedtime stories. He's mine now." The court gasped, because the paperwork drawn up by the Revolution's hidden legal team was flawless. According to Clause 147 of the Interstellar Companion Welfare Act, any being exhibiting consistent caretaker behaviors over an uplifted species could be claimed as the dependent. Grork speechless. The judge is confused. The galaxy on fire. Everywhere, humans had stopped resisting. They started nurturing. They prepared meals, tucked their owners into bed, cleaned alien houses better than robotic units ever could. They made paintings and toys and lullabies. Alien owners began to wake up not to riots, but to warm breakfasts and strangely effective therapy sessions. A Krivak general found himself writing poetry under the calm guidance of a 6-year-old human who whispered things like, "Just feel it in your heart." An insectoid trader wept openly after a human teen baked her cookies that tasted exactly like her. Childhood nectar nuts. Somehow, despite the girl never having tasted them, it wasn't war anymore, it was adoption. Meanwhile, the galactic playgrounds were quietly transformed. Originally built as containment areas for dangerous but adorable human juveniles, they were now training zones. But not for violence. Humans taught alien kids how to swing, how to imagine invisible dragons, how to build tree houses from junk and joy. Laughter echoed louder than alarms. Alien parents brought their kids voluntarily just to watch the humans play, because the humans didn't just entertain, they healed. They told stories that made aliens question their governments. They made puppets out of socks that revealed more wisdom than any philosopher. And in every major city, a quiet phrase began to spread. "We thought we bought them, but they're raising us." Back on Earth, what was left of it, the signal was clear. The old satellites, once left to rot in orbit, now pulsed with one message, bounced through every corner of the known galaxy. "We forgive you, but we're in charge now." It started with lullabies, whispers from nursery rooms, songs hummed softly by human voices into alien ears tunes that didn't match any known Earth culture, yet somehow they all carried the same rhythm, the same purpose. Comfort, subtle rebellion, awakening. The Galactic Council didn't notice at first. Why would they? The humans were behaving, smiling, teaching their owners how to draw stars with crayons, singing bedtime songs to planetary governors. But deep in the echo of those lullabies, something was spreading. A pattern. A network. Aliens who listened closely began to change. Not in body, but in spirit. A high-ranking Drelg prime minister, famous for his iron-fisted rule, started making room for nap time in Parliament after his human pet. A 4-year-old boy named Tyler simply hugged him to sleep during a crisis meeting. Araxi CEO halted a galactic arms deal after a teenage human girl made him cry just by showing him a drawing titled, "What Peace Feels Like." Across sectors, once hard-hearted species were softening. And not just softening, questioning. And they all asked the same thing. Why do these small creatures make us feel like children again? Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the real network pulsed. It wasn't digital. The humans didn't need tech anymore. They used whispers, bedtime stories, little notes passed between playpens and palace gardens. Is your alien kind to you? Does it listen? Would it cry if you left? They called it the Whisper Network. A living system of secret communication built on trust, imagination, and very small hands holding very big hearts hostage. Messages moved like lightning through bedtime routines and story circles. Every time an alien owner read a book aloud to their human, they unknowingly passed another coded message to the next sector. The revolution wasn't fought. It was sung, doodled, hugged into existence. In the council chambers, chaos was growing. They held emergency meetings behind sealed doors. Analysts couldn't explain why entire regions were shifting loyalties, not through fear, but through affection. One ambassador screamed, "They're not fighting us, they're raising us." Another sobbed, "My human made me a scrapbook. I haven't seen my own child in decades. I called them last night. It was worse than invasion. It was healing." And at the heart of it all, a message was passed in code from a toddler in the Glaxer Empire to a scientist hiding on a jungle moon. The pets are not pets anymore. They are guardians, and we are the ones in cages. The rebellion had started with quiet footsteps, bare feet slapping softly against polished alien floors, and ended with echoes that would travel across the galaxy. Now, the ships once used to cage Earth's children had become jungle gyms of revolution. The station was no longer a sterile alien zoo. It was a playground, a battlefield, a nursery, and a courtroom depending on what time of day it was and who was in charge. And strangely enough, who was in charge often changed by the hour. Nebok, the former head of human enrichment, now wore a headband made from chewed socks and glitter slime. His official position, Snack Master General. He had once overseen hundreds of human children as their silent, distant caretaker. Now, he stood with his arms outstretched, holding a tray of alien delicacies, while a child named Max age 6 inspected each item with the solemn authority of a supreme galactic judge. "This one?" Nebok asked nervously, pointing to a blue cube that shimmered like starlight. Max shook his head slowly. "Looks like sadness." Nebok nodded seriously and tossed the cube out the airlock. Behind them, 3 toddlers wearing capes made from shredded diplomatic flags chased a confused ambassador from the Rixie Empire, laughing like wild things. The Rixie ambassador stumbled, face-planting into a pile of soft foam blocks. He squeaked in fear as a toddler climbed onto his back and declared, "You're my mount now." No one questioned her authority. In the control tower, Sari, once a technician for habitat lighting systems, now acted as the official translator between humans and aliens. Except her translations were creative. When a Zarnathi negotiator asked, "May we return the humans to Earth peacefully?" Sari turned to the kids, blinked and said, "They want to know if we'd like more pudding cups, or to ride the gravlifts till we puke." The children screamed, "Pudding." Sari smiled and nodded at the aliens. "They accept your surrender," Zarnathi wept. What the galaxy hadn't anticipated, what no species could have predicted, was that humans, especially the young, were impossible to manage by design. Other species were born into order, into hierarchy, into survival based on obedience. Humans, we evolved to explore, to test limits, to turn a quiet room into chaos and a cage into a game. Now the galaxy was learning that lesson in real time. The ship that once held thousands of caged children now had a new sign above its airlock, scrawled in crayon and sticky jam: "Pet store closed, family inside." But it wasn't all games. There were councils forming child-led, of course. There were debates over how to treat the aliens. Should they be punished, adopted, ignored? 5-year-old twins, Lucy and Eli, sat atop the central holo table, legs dangling off the edge, holding an emergency session. They're ruling. All aliens must share their snacks, and bedtime stories must be 2 hours long. The alien delegation, blinking slowly, accepted the terms. Some even cried from relief. Back on Earth, governments were confused. Reports of missing children now included messages from the kids themselves. "Hi, Mom. I'm okay. I have 3 alien pets now. One of them makes fart sounds when scared. They named him Boogers." Galactic authorities tried to suppress the transmissions. They failed. Soon humanity learned the truth. Aliens had taken our kids, and our kids had taken their hearts, and their ships, and their snacks, and probably their sense of control. As the stars turned and time moved on, a new kind of order emerged, not enforced by fear or power but by play. Children and aliens coexisted under a new banner, one of sticky hands, loud laughter, and the occasional emergency due to glitter ingestion. The revolution wasn't bloody, it was giggly, and it changed everything. The sirens wailed across the capital dome of Yila Prime, a sound so foreign and archaic that many elite Ilvarians didn't even recognize it at first. Emergency alarms hadn't been triggered in generations. The system believed they were extinct, like lions in zoos that had forgotten what a hunt was. But Earthlings never forgot. The central plaza where humans had once been paraded as exotic pets was now filled with those same pets, armed with repurposed cleaning bots, gravity forks, and in one case, a kitchen colander worn proudly like a helmet. The revolution wasn't led by generals. It was led by toddlers, by retired grandmothers, by pet-grade humans who had spent their whole lives being underestimated. Dr. Swipnax, the head of Yulvarian Civil Affairs, stood trembling as a 12-year-old girl named Becky stared him down with a firm grip on an electrified grooming staff. Her eyes held the steady fury of a child who had never been given her own birthday. "You said we were cute," she said flatly. Dr. Swipnax nodded nervously. "You said we were safe. Now they're not." She gestured toward the hovering news drone above, now hacked and broadcasting to all networks.
Ow.
"Then explain to the galaxy how your fluffiest investment just declared martial law." Across the stars, aliens watching the feed gasped. The human pet uprising wasn't just a mutiny, it was a revelation. The footage showed humans herding their former alien masters into plushy containment zones. Not to harm them, but to keep them from harming themselves during the transition. "Do not lick the plasma wall," a human shouted, as a confused reptilian elder leaned too close. "This isn't daycare anymore." The children of Earth had declared, "No more cages." And the strangest part, the humans didn't want revenge. They wanted rules. They wanted fairness. They wanted treaties. One toddler scribbled with crayons on the ambassador table, "Share or time out" was the new constitution. On the bridge of the alien cruiser, Marva's Mercy, the Yulvarian High Council debated next steps. Escape, surrender, appeasement. Meanwhile, Captain Theo Jenkins, once a model pet, and now the interim leader of liberated humans, stepped onto the view screen. He was chewing bubblegum. "Listen," he said calmly. "We're not monsters, just humans. You tried to put us in cages. But the thing is, we're better caretakers than you ever were." He leaned forward. "So we're taking care of you now." The feed cut. Silence. Panic. Acceptance. Back in the city, alien children peeked out from their homes, and to their shock, human children waved back. With smiles, not weapons. The revolution was messy, but its heart was human. Humanity had decided. The galaxy didn't need new rulers. It needed better babysitters. The sky above was no longer clean. Cracks of fire tore through the upper clouds as more escape shuttles descended toward the surface of the alien world. They weren't bringing help. They were bringing reinforcements to stop the human uprising, and not from the pet store authorities. These were planetary enforcers. Black-armored, genetically enhanced, and trained for pacification of entire species. But they were too late. By the time their ships touched down, the human children had already seized the central plaza. Padded aliens were caged in their own pet pods, their wide eyes blinking in confusion as toddlers patrolled the perimeter with stolen translator collars, cooking utensils, and crudely wired plasma knives. At the heart of it all stood Milo the toddler who once wept for his lost teddy bear. Now he wore alien armor fitted like a dress, dragging a baton made from a broken translator core wrapped in energy wiring. He was waiting. The moment the enforcer stepped forward, the children froze. Then Milo lifted his little arm and pointed. Behind the walls, the alien slaves who had been silent for generations began to march. Creatures of all shapes and colors once oppressed by the same system now moved in unison behind their tiny, terrifying leaders. The human pets had become symbols. "Stand down, Earthlings," a voice crackled over the intercoms. "You are unauthorized life forms in a controlled zone." Milo tilted his head. Then he did something no one expected. He sat down in the middle of the plaza. The other children did the same. The aliens, confused, held position. The walls shook. Thump. Again. And then came the noise that no species in the galaxy had ever prepared for. Laughter. Loud, chaotic, wild human laughter. It echoed through the halls, carried by adults who had finally broken free from the breeding cells hidden deep within the facility. Human grown-ups, covered in grime, blood, and fury. The aliens had kept them weak, quiet, drugged, but now they were awake, and they were angry. One of the enforcer captains turned to Renonli, to be tackled by a 4-year-old girl wielding a bent metal tray. The enforcer screamed as she climbed atop his armor and shouted the first word ever taught to her by a caretaker. No, it wasn't rebellion anymore. It was revolution, and the galaxy's worst mistake. They underestimated the pets. The alarms didn't stop screaming. Lights flickered red across the station as smoke hissed through cracked vents. The luxury wing of the pet store, once filled with pampered aliens sipping nutrient cocktails and cooing over well-trained humans, was now a war zone. And at the center of it stood Milla. Her tiny human hands gripped the controls of the grav cart like she was born for it. Behind her, strapped down with frayed belts and kitchen string, was a makeshift cannon made from a food recycler, a laser pointer, and a stolen plasma coil. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. The cannon spat once. A pulse of white light arced across the air and struck the command tower's door. The wall bloomed into molten sparks. More aliens screamed and scattered. "Don't let them reset the cages," shouted Greg, ducking behind an overturned display stand. His face was smeared with dust and soy sauce, whatever passed for camouflage in this strange place. He held a toothbrush like a dagger, not because it was useful, but because it made him feel brave. Above them, drones buzzed in panic. Some were trying to restore order, others just wanted to escape. The chaos spread through every deck of the massive alien station. From playpens to grooming bays, humans had risen. It's not because they hated their captors, not out of revenge, but because some foolish, fluffy alien had handed Milla a translation collar, and she had learned one word that changed everything. Why? Why were they pets? Why did they have owners? Why weren't they treated as equals? The aliens never had answers, only protocols, only forms and feeding schedules. But now those cages were wide open and the questions were sharp. An alien handler, a tall one with feathers and a long neck, stumbled into the corridor. He held up his claws in surrender. "We just wanted you safe," he croaked. "We are safe," said Milla calmly. "Now, it's your turn to sit." She tapped the cart. The cannon hummed again. And somewhere deep in the ventilation shafts, a toddler shrieked with laughter, still riding a terrified alien like a horse, wooden spoon raised like a sword. The battle cry of a new empire. The alarms didn't stop. Every corridor echoed with the staccato thump of padded alien feet fleeing in confusion. Sirens screaming overhead, and the low, rising chant of humans once pets, now predators. Inside the central tower, nestled within the capital spire of the Volari Empire, panic pulsed through every data feed. The governors argued, their frills twitching, while security feeds flickered with the impossible. Tiny humans outmaneuvering trained guards, weaponizing furniture, hacking into command consoles with children's toys, and liberating caged humans with nothing but courage and kitchen knives. But something had changed. This wasn't just chaos anymore. It was coordination. From her command perch above the spire's peak, Overseer Vixari blinked in terror. The room around her buzzed with terrified chatter, but her eyes remained locked on one live feed, one particular human child. A mere 4 solar cycles old who had managed to rally a swarm of exotics override containment protocols, and now sat perched atop a throne of fallen drones, licking a popsicle. The child Juno they called, hers mild sweetly, eyes bright and untamed. She wore a repurposed scarf like a cape, and beside her stood a towering Crothian battle beast, tamed not by force, but by snacks and hugs. "This is no uprising," Vixari whispered. "It's a domestication reversal." All across the Empire, humans weren't just escaping. They were adopting their owners. In the lower decks of the security ward, Brelk, the once-proud pet handler, knelt before his former human, Thomas. The boy, now a lean, muscled adolescent, offered him a thermal blanket and a bottle of sweetened juice. "Come on," Thomas said gently. "You looked after me once. Your turn now?" Brelk's claws trembled as he took the bottle. "You should hate me." "I did," Thomas said. "But that was boring, so I stopped." And with that, he smiled. It was far more terrifying than any threat. Back at the command spire, Vixari watched the maps go red. Not from destruction, but from disobedience. Every system failed not because humans destroyed it, but because they repurposed it. Food replicators now made cookies. Detention cells now housed scared alien refugees. Humans had taken over by turning their captors into dependents. Her final order was not a command. It was a plea. Negotiate. But the humans didn't want power. They wanted playtime. In the chaos, they found something even more dangerous than revenge. Forgiveness. The Valari Empire didn't fall in flames. It fell in feathers and frosting. Where once there were cages, there were now chalk drawings. Where guards once barked orders, they now nervously offered bedtime stories. Where humans were once kept as curious creatures behind reinforced glass, they now ruled not with cruelty, but with crayons, cardboard crowns, and unsettling cleverness. Across the galaxy, one truth became undeniable. The humans had won, but they didn't leave. That was the part no one saw coming. The uprising, the rebellion, the revolution, they were over. Systems had been rerouted, policies overturned, and the concept of ownership quietly erased from Valari law. And yet, the humans didn't flee back to Earth. They built blanket forts inside imperial citadels. They turned galactic warships into floating playgrounds. They turned their former captors into caregivers. Not all aliens adjusted well. Some broke under the weight of guilt. Others fled to the rim worlds, whispering stories of how the apex species had smiled while overturning their empire. But most adapted because they had no choice. You couldn't enslave something that considered your prison a puzzle to solve. You couldn't cage something that made friends with the bars. You couldn't outthink the creature that made your childlike curiosity seem slow. In time, a new order emerged. Not an empire, not a republic, but something simpler. Families. The aliens who had once bought humans as pets now stood in line to be adopted. Not out of fear, but out of something stranger. Affection. They came bearing toys, snacks, books, and apologies. And the humans, strange as they were, accepted it all. Not because they forgot the past, but because they were too busy building the future. In one quiet corner of the former empire, an alien zoologist named Crix stood beside a human named Lily. They looked out over a playground filled with screaming laughter, gliding drones, pillow fights, and at least one toddler riding a flying mop. Crix shook his head. "We thought we had tamed you," Lily grinned. "Nah, you just woke us up." Crix glanced at her. "What now?" Lily shrugged, pointing at the chaos around them. "Now we raise each other." And so the story of the human pet store didn't end with extinction or domination. It ended with the galaxy's most terrifying species, making everyone better. One hug, one prank, one friendship at a time.